Good morning. Welcome to Advisory. Today we're doing our second part of the fact-finding lesson. So last lesson, we talked about our identities and what assumptions can be made about us based on our identities, okay? So this is a question I wanted to pose. Has anyone ever made an assumption about you? Here are some assumptions, right? Girls can't do math. Boys are bad at writing. Girls don't play sports. And boys don't like to read. You may have heard some of these before. Maybe you haven't. But these are just examples of assumptions that can be made based on gender, okay? So there's a lot of ways people can make assumptions. Assumptions are things we believe are true or right without any real proof, right? They're things they're opinions, basically. Assumptions prevent us from seeing new things, and they keep us trapped in that 2D thinking, like we talked about. So it keeps us in our comfort zone, right? So when you ask questions, that's how we start to break down these assumptions. You can see more about whether it's a person or a thing or an event because of the questions that you're asking, okay? So in this example, so these are assumptions again being made based on a person's gender, but stereotypes can lead people to make assumptions about people based on any identifying factor. So any of those factors that you put down in your little web yesterday about the things that you identify with, it could be like race, gender, ethnicity, your socioeconomic status, anything that you listed on that in your journals are things that people can make assumptions about, okay? So again, the goal here is to ask the right questions so that we understand more. Okay, so against that, there's that 2D thinking versus 3D thinking. So these are two examples, right? So Jim, if he's in okay. So Jim here, the little glasses on, was sure that he was going to be selected as the lead for the new play at school, okay? And his drama teacher told him he would post the cast list by the end of the day. And then when Jim looked at the cast list, he realized he wasn't listed anywhere. So Jim had not gotten the part for the play that he wanted. So he was left to think, he didn't have any information other than his name was just not on the list, okay? So if he were to stay in the 2D level of thinking, this is an example of how he could approach it, right? So he'd walk into the drama teacher's room and yells at the teacher, "What are you thinking? Jim never does drama again at the school," okay? Because he assumed that the reason he didn't get the play was the drama teacher's decision and fault, and it made him angry because he felt like he deserved it, and the drama teacher didn't give him what he wanted. So therefore, he's never going to do drama again. That's it. That's it for him. He's not going to try. He's not going to ask any questions. That's his approach. That's his 2D level of thinking. Okay. If you were to think about it in a 3D thinking or using critical thinking to understand his new situation, you could say Jim asks the drama teacher what he can do to get the part next time. And the drama teacher then says that Jim was actually selected for a different play. Okay. So sometimes, whenever something goes wrong in our lives, we assume the worst about the other people involved, right? Like, all my friends canceled their plans; they mustn't want to hang out with me, right? We make assumptions that can be damaging to either ourselves or to our relationships, right? So you can believe that your teacher, in this case, your teacher or your friend or your coach, is out to get you, right? Or you can just ask questions to try to understand the whole situation. In this case, Jim asked the questions that let him see that the reason why he was not chosen for that part was because he was chosen for another part. But if he didn't ask those questions, then he would have just quit drama for the rest of the school year, right? Which was something that he obviously was passionate about. So that would be such a shame if he just took that action of him not being on that list as enough information for him to decide to drop out of the drama club, okay? So this is just a very simple example of how two ways of looking at the same thing. And ultimately, with the 3 critical thinking, it allowed Jim to be a part of something that he enjoyed. So we talked about people making assumptions about us, right? We saw that little, we made our little own identities of those little traits that make us who we are, and what people can assume about us based on those identities. But now I want to know, when was a time that you made assumptions about someone else? Okay, so please share with your classmates what you assumed and what questions you could have had asked instead. Okay, so a time when I'm going to just give an example for me. A time when I made an assumption about someone was when I worked at South High School. Okay, this is just an example. Student was sent to me because of behavioral issues, right? The teacher was having issues with the student disrupting class. Because all I knew of the student was the issues that were arising in this class and the conflict between him and the teacher, I made the assumption that the intervention needed to be a behavioral intervention. I had, as a counselor, had to be like, well, this is what we're going to do because he's exhibiting these behaviors. Okay. But what I later realized, and this was me being new at this job, right? I later realized that his basic needs were not being met, and that was leading him to having these conflicts in his classroom. Okay, so it wasn't just about, him just being disruptive. There was more to it. There's a deeper reason for why these things were happening in his classroom. So when I realized his basic needs were not being met, I was able to then reassess how I approached the student, and I reevaluated what interventions needed to be done to support him and his teacher. Okay, so this is an example of my own. This is an assumption that I made about this student based on this little information that I had. Okay, and then I was able to ask some questions, and then to find out that there was more to this. Okay, so this is what I want you to think about. Reflect, either write in your journal, discuss as a class, when did you make an assumption about somebody? Okay. And what kind of questions could you have asked that would have allowed you to understand more about the situation? Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.